My next guest is someone that many of you have seen me interview before. He has a remarkable story. Of all the people I've interviewed, he has the most memorable interview for me of anyone who I've ever interviewed. His name is Joe Torrillo. He's a former 9/11, former September 11th first responder. And he was buried alive, not once, but twice under both Twin Towers on September the 11th. Remarkably, he lived. But there's something else that many people aren't aware. You would be aware if you saw my previous interview, and that is that in addition to being a 9/11 first responder and being buried alive under both Twin Towers and rescued, he also studied structural engineering and architecture in steel and concrete design. The reason I tell you that is because today, as you know, there are a lot of conspiracy theories flowing out there saying that the 9/11 stories, the people behind 9/11 is not being honestly disclosed. And these conspiracy theories are gaining and gaining. And Joe Torrillo reached out to me and said, Rick, I know this story. I want to speak to it. I want to set the record straight. So joining me at this time is former 9/11 first responder, buried alive and rescued not once, but twice under both Twin Towers. Also, someone who studied structural engineering and architecture in steel and concrete design. Joe, good to have you with us.
Hey, Vic, how's everything? Good to speak with you again.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Hanging in there, been through a lot, obviously, in the last 24 years, had multiple surgeries. And unfortunately, because of the brain injury, it caused me to have Parkinson's disease now. So I'm battling Parkinson's, very, very terrible.
I'm sorry to hear
And
that. I was not aware of that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, anybody who suffers a bad brain injury, you're very likely you're going to get Parkinson's at some point in your life. And I had a very bad brain injury on September 11th, and it's just manifesting itself now, unfortunately.
Well, Joe, a lot of conspiracy theories out there, some big name personalities in the media saying, wait, it's not who we were told that was behind 9/11. And you want to address some of these stories. What is your message?
My message is, plain and clear. Most of the people who have these conspiracy theories, they don't really know much about the actual support system of the Twin Towers. And when I was in engineering school, two of my professors, Louis Radioli and George Borby, were civil engineering professors, but they also worked for the concrete contractor on the Twin Towers, a man by the name of Dick Underhill. And because they worked on the Twin Towers as the concrete superintendents, they can take us on a class trip to study the new steel novel lightweight design of the towers when I was in school. And of course, I graduated. I didn't really do anything with that degree. I was supposed to work for a big construction company, but instead I made a living with the New York City Fire Department. And after graduating the training academy, I was placed in the firehouse, ironically, right across the street from the Twin Towers. And now I'm back as a firefighter protecting them and no longer an engineering student studying them. But on the morning of September 11th, all those memories came back to me about being there on the class trip studying them.
Yeah, and you went on that trip and you have made a statement that you knew the Twin Towers were not stable.
Rick, that's probably one of the first things I said that morning. The first thing I actually said was I wanted a terrorist attack. The second thing I said, everybody on the top of the towers are going to die. We're not going to get to them, and they're not getting down. And then I said the towers are going to collapse. But very few people would listen. Very few people could believe what I was saying. It didn't make sense, but I was adamant about it. I knew 100%, and I swear on the life of my children, my grandchildren, that I knew those towers were going to collapse. Trying to get people to believe me. Some listened, they were alive, some didn't. I guess they might have been killed. I'll never know.
And you knew they were going to collapse because why?
because I understood the steel lightweight design, and I realized that the jet had caused uh, significant structural damage at the point of impact. And I do a whole presentation on this subject called "The Design, the Collapse of the Twin Towers," and I explain in detail the amount of structural damage that was done by those two jets. And with that amount of structural damage, there's no way in the world, coupled with the amount of fire, that those towers were not going to collapse. It was very obvious to me. Maybe it wasn't obvious to other people, but I know in the way the steel system was constructed, it was very obvious to me.
So you knew the towers are coming down. Uh, how does this tie into the conspiracy theories that are out there right now?
Well, you know what? First of all, let's get something straight, okay? People said that this was a planned demolition. You know, there's a company down in Washington, D.C. They specialize in doing planned demolitions of buildings, like in Las Vegas. Instead of knocking down a building, floor by floor, they blow up the building. And it's something like that's been done around the country by this company in Washington, D.C. Now, when you take down a building under a planned demolition, you blow out the columns on the first floor, and then the building sits down upon itself. There were no explosives in that building. In order to take down a building with a planned demolition, you have to have a tremendous amount of explosives. And if you watch any YouTube channel where you can see this company in Washington, D.C., blowing up a building on a planned demolition, just watch any of them. They're all on YouTube. They count backwards from 10 to 1. Then all of a sudden you start hearing bombs and flashes on the bottom of the building, and then the building just lays down upon itself. There were no bombs in this building, none whatsoever. If there were bombs in the building, I would have seen it. I was outside both towers. There's no way there were bombs in those buildings.
And is that the main thing you've seen out there in the conspiracy theorists, or the building was bombed?
Well, that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying that it was a planned demolition, that explosives were placed inside the building to make it fall down upon itself. When you do a planned demolition, a building falls at the bottom of the building. The towers didn't fall from the bottom. The towers fell from the top. The uppermost part of the towers lost their strength, fell like a rock on a house of cards, and then the whole building just came down in what we call a pancake type of collapse. It's all on video. You don't have to believe me. It's all on video.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So you're not addressing, or are you, when some of these conspiracy theorists say that uh, it wasn't the people behind 9/11 that we've been told it was. It's a different group. Any response to that?
Well, you know what? I hear a lot of conspiracy theories from all over the world, and some of these conspiracy theories are basically saying that our government knew
Yeah,
that these Islamic terrorists were actually planning to do this and did nothing to stop it, so
good
that we
point.
could be drawn into a war. I mean, you know what? I don't have enough knowledge about that. Is there a possibility that our government knew firsthand? I don't know about that. But what I do know is that there were no explosives in this building, that the buildings fell because of the impact of the two jets.
Yeah, which makes it feel like it was the 9/11 Islamic terrorists after all, uh, not a side story. You know, Joe, a lot of you have an amazing life story. And, a lot of people did not realize that you studied structural engineering and steel and concrete design. And you were a firsthand visitor from a architectural perspective of the Twin Towers prior to them collapsing. And so you bring a good a good opinion, if you will, to the expert opinion, I should say, to the table here.
Well, you know what? Once again, Vic, I do a whole presentation on the design, the collapse of the Twin Towers. I've been invited all over the country, around the world, to do this presentation. And when people see my presentation, it really makes a lot of sense for people who not necessarily are conspiracy theorists, but some people just want to know more about the actual mechanics of the collapse. And the way I explain it, they say, you know what, Joe, that makes perfect sense. But you know what the big thing, Vic, is? Everybody forgets that there were two 767 jets sitting inside that building. Those buildings, the floors of those buildings were designed to carry about 80 pounds per square foot of load, which is the same load variance in a residential home. The floors were only 4 inches thick concrete on very lightweight steel beams. Those floors were not designed to hold the weight of a 767 jet. People forget that.
You know, Joe, I recall we first interviewed 8 years ago. You had said that you visited those twin towers as a student, and you made the prediction that these towers aren't stable. There's going to be a problem here someday. Do I have that correct? I'm going from memory here.
Well, I mean, when I studied those buildings, I was flabbergasted at the fact that they seem to be missing the requisite amount of steel that should be holding them up. So radically different than the construction of the Empire State Building and other high-rise buildings all throughout New York City. This is a new, very radical, lightweight design. To me, it was pretty amazing on how the building was constructed. You would have thought that there would have been a much more massive amounts of steel. But you know what? No matter what people say, at the end of the day, those towers stood for 30 years. They'd still be standing today. So the architect and the engineering team obviously knew what they were doing. But the fact is, any time a building is struck by a big jet like a 767, the potential for collapse is probably always going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you joining us. I get troubled when I hear all these conspiracy theories and coming from people that I would consider to be reputable media personalities and people with big followings, and to have someone like yourself come out and add a taste, a flavor of reality to those stories is really refreshing. I thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Vic. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm willing to debate anybody on this subject, anytime, any place, totally unprepared.
All right. We'll see how it goes. By the way, do you have a website anywhere by chance?
I do www.joetorrillo.com. I have 37 topics on the speaking menu. I do a lot of inspirational speaking, a lot of speaking for fire departments and various organizations all over the world.
Wonderful. All right, Joe. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Vic. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye now.